Evening, bitches. Hugh here again, back on BooTalk, and today I am alone yet again, but something really exciting happened over the weekend, at least for me, and I wanted to share that with you. Now, if you have gone through and you've listened to or watched each episode of BooTalk, you already know that I'm a fan of an RPG tabletop horror game called Dread. More specifically, I like to run Dread. I like to, as the kids would say, game master Dread. I'm not very dexterous with my hands, so a Jenga tower doesn't really work out for me, but I love telling stories, and I love crafting stories, and I love watching what happens to the people going through the story. Now, with that said, I did my second ever session of Dread, following the same storyline as we had last time, but to the next degree. So, if you don't know what happened to the last one, just a brief recap. I had my players play high school students who went to a school field trip, and things went bad. This spider human thing started attacking and killing all of the students, made the teacher go completely batshit mad, and the students had to escape. That was fun, but I learned a lot since then. I railroaded my players a bit too much in that game, and part of that was due to the fact that I was recording the game live, and I wanted to make sure that it was within a time frame good enough for recording and watching and listening, whatever you want to say. I wanted to make sure that it would work. So I railroaded them a bit, and it kind of detracted from the overall experience, I would say. So I took a different approach with this next one. And I should get it out of the way right now. I don't know how long this episode's going to go. This is probably going to be a bit of a shorter episode, just because I'm just recapping a story that was done. Now, if I had recorded again, I probably would have had like 2 or 3 episodes out of this, because the session lasted probably about 3 hours. It was a lot of fun on my part. Now, to those who may not know much about Dread, the Game Master creates a set of questions for their characters to answer, so that the players can get to know their characters a bit more, the Game Master can get to know the characters a bit more, and maybe even incorporate something from their story or the questions into the story. I didn't get to use a lot of the answers that I had for the characters that I had, but I figured it'd be fun to go ahead and read off what questions I came up with. So let me just scroll in here. Let's zoom in. Started off simple with, what is your name? Of course, you just wanted to know, what their name is. So what do you call them? How old they are? And then I asked for a physical description. Most of my characters just sort of went with their actual physical description, which is fine. It's actually probably preferred that way. The closer the character is to the player, the more the player is invested in the character. After that, I went a bit more in detail, a bit more personal, with what is your occupation? What do you do to support yourself? What are your dreams? What is your deepest fear? Who is it you care for most in this world? Do you believe in the paranormal and magic? On a scale of 1 to 10, how intelligent are you? What's your best subject? And what's your worst? And the last question, which was my favorite that I asked, was, In a life or death scenario, would you sacrifice yourself to save a stranger, or would you sacrifice a stranger to save yourself? Now, I wasn't done there either. There was one last secret question that I asked everyone after they had turned in their questionnaires. And that was, you have a secret, a dark secret. What is it? And I should have seen it coming, but almost everyone defaulted to, I murdered a dude. Like, I killed somebody. Everyone said that, with the exception of Jackie, who was a returning character from the first game. She didn't have to answer that because her secret was basically that she was going to go on and start to investigate things like the paranormal, investigate demonology, trying to figure out what happened at the Garden of Shadow. So we move forward, and I started off all my characters just taking a walk. None of them knew each other by name. They were just walking on their own, and I let them know that there was a force trying to drive them in a certain direction. Two of my characters followed without any problem. Jackie, which makes sense, did not. She started to deviate from the path, fearing what was trying to get her there. And then she heard a familiar sound, kind of like the old fear sound that I did, where I just kind of did it sounds stupid to me, but apparently it works. But she started hearing that, but it was talking and telling her that she needs to go that way. Like, she is important in what is about to happen, and she needs to be there. And when she was told that, her curiosity piqued, and she went in that direction. Jackie ended up going in first. She arrived at the location first. It was an old house. A house on a hill that no one has really ever seen before. It's almost as if this house appeared out of nowhere. But her curiosity was piqued, and she went in. The next one to arrive was Emma. She was one of my new characters, and she arrived without any hesitation, went in, and met up with Jackie for the first time. And then Nick showed up, another one of my new characters, and he went in with no problems and met Jackie and Emma. Now, Jackie at this point was kind of taking the leadership role. She was experienced with these kinds of things and was very off-put that others would even consider being there. So they discussed things a little bit, and inside the room that they were talking in, they looked over to the side and they noticed a symbol. The same symbol that was shown to them in the first game. The circle with the weird F in the middle. That was enough to spook Jackie, and Jackie wanted to get out, so she went and tried to open the door to leave. It was locked. She couldn't get out. So the only way to go at that point was further into the house. They went in, and the house itself was pretty normal to start off with. Not normal in like a modern sense. There was no TVs, there was no modern commodities there, but it was normal in the sense of there wasn't really anything horrific going on. The most horrific things were, to begin with, was decorations not being exactly what you originally thought they were. Upon closer inspection, those dancing people aren't dancing people, those are dancing skeletons. Just stuff like that. just decorations were a bit off. This was just kind of the build tension moment. The players themselves know something is going to happen. The characters may not, but it would still be the same sort of tension because they're in a house they're unaware of what's in it, and unable to leave. They continued on to the next floor. Things got a little bit darker there in terms of scenery, but I still kept it pretty minor. I think the second floor there was a portrait of a young woman. They examined the portrait, moved on, and just continued exploring. And then they moved on to the third floor. That's where things were going to get interesting. I had a cultist there, which you may remember from the first, that I had hints of a cult following of this fear character, in which case everyone within the cult sacrifices an eye, and what they do in this cult was not 100% known, but the characters were going to find out a bit more. So they explored through there, but this cult member who was acting very feral, very hunchbacked. He was a normal dude, but he acted very feral. They went a route I didn't expect them to go. I warned them before the game started that if they enter a life or death situation, I will warn them it's life or death. But I didn't do that quite at first, because I expected them to just go for the throat. I keep forgetting that when you're playing a tabletop RPG game, your characters are going to act more like people and less like video game characters. These characters wanted to sneak around this guy, just wanted to leave him be. So the first two did, and made it into separate rooms. But Nick stayed behind and was going to try to sneak to a different room. Now, what was going through my mind at this point was I had already made Jackie and Emma pull from the tower to be able to sneak past this guy. They did. They snuck past him. And I was just in awe, to be honest, that they were going to do this. The tower was getting a bit more precarious, and Nick was about to try to sneak past as well. What was going to happen was, in between every single room, they were going to have to pull from the tower. That makes things difficult on me and on them, because I have a story to tell. I want to tell it, and I want them to live through it. I want deaths to happen, but I don't want to kill everyone. I want at least one person left alive to witness the story. So I then warned them, this is life or death. If he sees you, he will try to kill you. That's when Nick pulled out a dagger that he had found earlier and stabbed him in the back. Judging by where he decided to stab this cultist, I could not bring myself to say he would die. So I had the scenario in my head that he had the dagger in the back and kind of twisted it a little bit so that it would get stuck, and was maintaining control of this guy from behind. The ruckus alerted the other two, and they came out and started to wonder what the fuck was going on as well, and saw that Nick was struggling with this cultist with a dagger in his back. One of them ran up with a sword that they had pulled from pretty much the first room that they were in, and she severed his head. The way I described it was the head rolled, got chopped off, and then rolled off the balcony to the bottom floor. Jackie went on to investigate a bit more, and Emma took the body without the head and had the body rejoin with the head by tossing it down the staircase as well, so that it would go down to the bottom. After that, the third floor kind of played out the same way the second one did. It was creepy. Things were getting a bit darker. But they had an encounter. They know something or someone is there, and they don't fully understand why they're there. Until they make it to the attic. They get to the attic, and things are getting darker and darker. And they start to explore up there. They go into a room, open a door to a nursery where a man's ghost appears and flies through Emma. I made her pull for it. She lived, so the ghost did no damage to her. But the ghost was something that they had remembered. I believe it was the second or third floor. I think it was the third floor, where there was also a library. And Jackie went in there and found a few books on demonology, and eventually found a red book that was a key to opening a trap door. When that happened, they found a skeleton with a note in it, in its hand, and the note said that something along the lines of, I must pardon you. You know what? I can just full on read it out if I still have the file. I do have the file, but I need to find it. Computer's taking a while to load things. I should have loaded all this up beforehand. Alright, I have it up. The note said, in its entirety, "My dear, it is most unfortunate that we must part this way. Even still I shed no tear. I am a woman who shall not be tamed nor halted. This was your mistake. Henceforth, I will keep you here, near at all times, here when I need you. You will always be mine, but I am no longer yours. B.M." Now, they made a connection here, very, very early on. One of the books was Demonology Summoning Rituals of Bloody Mary. I didn't think that through when I originally told them they found that book. So when they found the BM note, they figured Bloody Mary, which was correct. So they continued on. That was pretty much the only thing of significance that they could find there. And keep in mind, along the way, they're finding bits and ends of things that they were using, mainly weapons. Jackie collected a couple books to try to help her later on down the road. And they moved on to the attic. They started to search around up there, and one of them, Nick liked to go off on his own a couple of times. Emma and Jackie stayed together pretty often, and they just went on. It should also be noted that when the ghost hit Emma was not a believer in the paranormal or magic, so she just had a ghost fly through her, and she was shaken by it. It took some coercing by Jackie to get her to get up off the floor and move on, which is kind of funny later on. But they're up there, they're searching around. Jackie and Emma are together in one room, and Nick went on to another room. So these two experiences that I'm about to describe happened at the same time. Now, in the game, of course, I addressed one room, and then I addressed another. But in the interest of what the time frame actually was, these two scenarios happened at the same time. So Jackie and Emma came into this room, and in the corner was a rocking chair with a disheveled old woman, who they had recognized as the woman from the portrait. Now, there had been a couple of other portraits recording this woman's aging, and they recognized this woman. And she's just rocking in the rocking chair and starts talking with them about how she needs them there. And when they ask if they could leave, she says yes. They said, "We can leave the house." She said, "Oh no, you can leave the room. You can't leave the house. I need you." So they were a little confused, and they were a little on edge from meeting this woman, who seems to be rather composed for who she is. They weren't really 100% sure what to do with her. They kind of start to back out a little bit, and Bloody Mary, this is who that woman is, looks to Emma and asks if she's Emma Pierce. Now, the player that I have playing Emma chose this name herself. She sent me Emma Pierce, and I immediately made a connection to the first game. So then Bloody Mary said, "Emma Pierce, great-granddaughter of Waylon Pierce. Waylon's thwarted me once before, but now with your help, I can win." Or something to that effect. I didn't say it exactly like that. So even more confused, especially because Bloody Mary knew at least one of their names, they moved on. Back to Nick. He went into a room that was very similar in style to the other room, but Bloody Mary was in the rocking chair. She was in the corner rocking, and Nick started talking to her, and she said nothing. And he got a little closer, and she said nothing. She did nothing. He got even closer. She did nothing. He backed away. She did nothing. He said something. She did nothing. She just sat in that rocking chair, rocking back and forth, and stared at him. And it creeped him out a little bit. Eventually, they made it to a very important room. They made it to a children's room, where they found a diorama of the house. There, they were able to find the secret doors they needed to find. They automatically figured out where this secret door, the main one they needed, was, and they went to the room that it was in. At that point, the secret door was in the only room they hadn't been in the entire house. So they went to that room. In that room, there was a chest. Emma wanted to open it. She did. And in there, she found a mummified corpse with its head severed from its body. And they were confused at first, thinking that it was... there's no way this could be the guy that we killed earlier. Is it him? I don't understand. It was, and she wanted to get a closer look. So she went for a pull from the tower, and the tower fell. So this guy's ghost came out of nowhere and just ripped through her body. She was bleeding out rapidly. Jackie did everything she could to hold back the bleeding, and all she could do was keep Emma alive a few seconds longer. Emma died, and they left her corpse there and went down the secret door and the secret staircase, down and down and down into the catacombs. So they got down there, and the catacombs, as what I'm calling it, it's not what it's officially called, was like widely spread out. I didn't know what they were going to do down there. I figured they could be stuck in there for like an hour, and they just walked straight through it. They immediately found the exit. So anything I had planned to happen in there was immediately thwarted, but it was no big deal. Really, the catacombs was just meant to be set up as like, okay, we've been building up towards encounters all this time, here's some encounters. When they got down to a certain part, they were attacked by two ghoulish looking men. They killed them and moved on, and immediately found the exit, I should say. It's not really an exit. It was just another staircase leading even further down. They got further down there and found just like basically a trophy room of just random objects. And they weren't really interested in it, but they went off to one side instead of the other, where they found a bunch of basically jail cells with shackles lining the walls. They found a skeleton of no consequence there, and they found a secret door. So they went through and found themselves into a main area. In it, there is an altar. Laying on the altar was Emma's corpse, and standing above Emma was Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary released a shit ton of blood to pour over Emma's body and began chanting something, an unknown language. Later on in the chant, spectral images of her would appear all over the room doing the same thing. They pushed down Mary, they stabbed Mary, she continued chanting. They pushed Emma off of the altar, Bloody Mary continued chanting. It was only when Jackie realized that Bloody Mary was showing signs, kind of like what fear was like, that he was basically impervious to almost anything you would do to him. Bloody Mary was not. She could have been killed. But, like, honestly, I feel like if you slit her throat, you could have killed her. I would have had to make that decision on the spot, but she was human. She was just very, very resilient. But I called, as a game master, I told Jackie, you're recognizing similar patterns with Bloody Mary as to fear. So Jackie called out to Nick, who was ready to slit Mary's throat, and told him she can't be killed. She could. She could be killed. I didn't want her to be killed. I wanted her to live so that what I was doing would still happen. But it worked out in the end. Nick abandoned a pole and basically got bitch slapped so hard. And from there on, she continued chanting until it eventually morphed into an unknown language. And it was something along the lines of, with this child, we release fear from his bonds, and with it, a new fear shall rise to carry the mantle. Something along those lines. With that, there was a bit of rumbling in Emma's stomach, and a creature burst from her stomach. Looked like a human fetus, and it rapidly grew into this monster. Similar to, but not exactly like fear. It sprouted legs, spider legs from its back, as Bloody Mary initiated it to do its job, as fear was unable to do, since he was trapped by the garden, and began drawing 4 separate symbols onto the ground with the legs. Once these symbols were completed, 4 things arose from the ground: pestilence, famine, war, and death. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse had been awakened by this new fear, who, since he was not constricted by the confines of the garden, could fulfill his duty. Bloody Mary and Fear both offered themselves up to the 4 horsemen to have them be sacrificed, to try to awaken their power a bit more. It's an unknown sacrifice that you should basically be known to, that you should know of. The characters didn't know it at the time. Bloody Mary sacrificed herself, and Fear sacrificed himself. Fear was sacrificing himself as Fear, but also as something else. Fear was a manifestation of the house. The house had its own spirit, and it was being siphoned in with the commandments of what Fear was supposed to be, to fulfill those roles. So the house lost its soul, could no longer keep these characters trapped, and had been fed to the 4 horsemen. The horsemen stood there and stared at the characters. The characters didn't know why, and they asked, "What do you want?" And they replied, "The end." Of what? Everything. The characters didn't know why I had them just standing there. There was a reason. For one, it was mind games. These kinds of things like mind games. But for 2, also, they're in a place they're unfamiliar with. They need a way out. So, as they moved out of the house and slowly made their way back up to the front door, they were followed. Once the door was in sight, the 4 horsemen stepped through and into the world. Jackie and Nick stepped out of the door of the house, turned around, and the house was gone. Jackie called a few people to warn them that she thinks the apocalypse is about to start, and ended up calling Joey from the first game. And his response was that he was glad that it happened, because that was his idea. He suggested it to Mary. Their friendship has frayed quite a bit because of that. And then we're moving into the next game. You know, Emma's dead. Alex is dead from the first one. If those players want to return, they'll make new characters. But I want to do a mix-up of all the characters that have survived so far, joining together in one final story. And I've already told the players what this story is going to be. Famine, pestilence, war, and fear is not a horseman, and death are basically combining forces. So the overarching story is that years ago during the Civil War, the world was meant to end. Fear had arrived and was meant to summon the 4 horsemen to end the world. He couldn't do that by virtue of the fact of where he was summoned to. But now that everything has played out the way that it has, They've been summoned. This world is overdue for ending. If it had begun back when it was quote-unquote supposed to begin, things would have happened gradually, one horseman at a time, until it all ended. But since we're overdue, they're all acting at once. So when you get pestilence, famine, war, and death all together, we're creating zombies. Zombies are hungry. Famine. Zombies are plagued. Zombies have tactics, primitive tactics, but tactics, horde mentalities, war. And zombies are dead. Death. So, the zombie apocalypse is beginning. And I'm working on the next game for them right now. I'm enjoying working on it quite a bit, and I feel like I'm going to do something similar to this the next time. I can't even really give you much of a preview into what I plan to do on the third one, because I don't plan to do anything. I'm creating a random generator. With the roll of dice, I'll figure out what this world looks like. I'll figure out what happens on the fly. The generator could be ruthless, or it could be very forgiving. Until the game happens, we don't know. But in the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and begin to close things out. This did go pretty long. Not as long as I thought it did, but pretty long. Or not as short as I thought it would. But it's not bad. Just a few things. I'm recording this literally a day before it is going to go up. So I'm going to Midwest. I'm going to the Midwest Honors Convention. If you so happen to listen to me, which, judging by my analytics, you aren't. But if you are, and if you're at Midwest Honors Convention, you can find me there. I will be there. I do not plan to dress up as anything, but I do plan to walk the floor. I'm probably going to have some business cards for BooTv and BooTalk. And on, I believe it's Saturday, the Monster Ball, I will be there. And I will be sloshed. But I can't wait to do everything there. I can't wait for Midwest Honors Convention. I went last year and it was phenomenal. I plan to do an episode on it. So stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, everyone, as I always say, stay spooky, my friends.
Initiate Fear Chud sequence.